I got the this video is being live streamed message, just FYI. So
Okay.
I assume everybody gets it, maybe. I don't know.
How can I? Christina, can you share the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Right.
Does everything look fine, Melissa?
Yes, I see it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna let everyone in. Hi, everybody. I'm slowly letting people in. This is Melissa Humphreys. Our amazing IT people are here helping me run this from our coordinating boardroom. To get everyone in.
Hi, this is Angie. I just want to check and see if you can hear me.
I can, Angie, thanks.
Okay, good. My phone has been acting a little weird lately, so I wanted to test it.
Loud and clear. As we get together, I will say we're broadcasting from the boardroom at the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board, but this is also being streamed on YouTube, and we are recording. So your patience as I figure this out. There's a lot going on, technically speaking. In the boardroom, I will say, if you are a board member, please have your camera on. So in the boardroom, to comply with Open Meetings Act, we can pin you. Your faces here in the room. And researchers, as we go through and get to your projects, you're welcome to turn your camera on. But I will go ahead and get started. We're at 1:05, and I don't see many more people in the waiting room, so all right, we have a quorum, so I will get us started. Thank you again for being with us today. We have quite the packed agenda, so let's get going. Again, I want to let people know this is a virtual meeting. It is being recorded and it's being streamed on the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's YouTube page. I'm coordinating from our headquarters, so members of the public are able to attend if desired. Let's begin by taking roll to ensure we have a quorum. So after I say your name, would you please let me know? Present. First, Linda Rosca from TEA.
Present.
Sarah. Teresa. Rabazo. Rodney.
Present.
Celeste Alexander.
Here.
Leonard. Catherine Horn.
Present.
I'm Melissa Humphreys, interim board chair for the ERC Advisory Board. A quick few notes, logistical notes. I mentioned before, if you're a voting member, please keep your camera on and ensure your microphone is unmuted when you're speaking and voting. If you must turn your camera off, and this is in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, if you must turn your camera off, then you are counted as not in the meeting. So if we lose a quorum at that time, we'll have to stop the meeting until we have a quorum again. This is a packed agenda, and because we are asking everyone to be on camera the whole time, we can absolutely take a break while we're going. So I'll check in around halfway through, but if anybody would like to request a break, please feel free. All right, so the next item on the agenda is public testimony. So we can move on. The next agenda item is consideration and possible action to approve additional data requests. So we will start with data 1. UTA 159, early progress and outputs of a Grow Your Own Teachers program for high school students and paraprofessionals in Texas. Do we have any researchers here that like to say anything?
This is Mega. I'm a researcher associated with the project. We're asking for additional data for SPEC so we can analyze the paraprofessional, whether they got like the certificates and whatnot from the grant.
Thanks. Do I have any comments from the board, comments or questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
This is Rodney. I second.
Great. Approved. Thank you, Mega.
Thank you.
Next. Data request UH005.
Wait, Melissa, we have to vote.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, now motion passes. And
Melissa, I'm so sorry but since we're off script for 1 second, I may be the only one, but you sound really distant. But that may just be me. So others, if that is me, I'll figure out my own issue.
no, can someone else tell me if this is better? This is a totally new setup, y'all, so I am a little off kilter for the moment. But
so for me, that's
is this
better.
louder?
Yes, that is, for me, that's much better. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we will continue. Thanks, Kathy. It's an important part of it, especially for recording. All right, so now data 2, evaluating RISE STEM professional development. Do I have any researchers here to comment? All right, any questions or comments from the board on this item? Okay, then do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve this extension. Celeste?
It's a data.
Oh, a data request,
Additional
sorry.
data. Yes.
Additional data for UH005.
Do you have a second?
This is Kathy. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Right, motion passes. Data 3, UH030. Any researchers here to comment? Any questions or comments from the board? Great. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the data, additional data request for 030.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Approved. Thank you. All right. Data 4, UH017. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
I'll second.
Discussed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Data 5 and Extension 1, UH031. Any comments from researchers here? Any questions or comments from the board on this item? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the data and extension for UH031.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, now to the extension requests. There are a lot of them, so we can have some good conversation. Let's start with extension 2, UTA 088. Do I have any questions or comments from the board? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve extension for UTA 088.
A second.
Two, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, extension 2. Extension 3, UTA 129. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, it looks like this is nearly a 3-year extension, and we thought the maximum might be only 2. Is that correct?
Sorry, Lindsay Bing here. That was an error on my part based on the COVID date extension. So the actual extension should be within the normal 2 years. And I think there was an updated proposal to fix that. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, thanks, no problem.
And I think we have the 2-year one on file. Any other questions or comments? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Rodney Andrews, I motion to approve.
Kathy Horn, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. extension 4, UTA 134. Right, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
Have a second?
Rodney Andrews, a second.
You, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, motion passes. Okay, extension 5, UTD 090.
I just had some questions about the number of years. It looks like this has been an 8-year project, and I just didn't know that we normally had projects go that long.
Was, Rodney, do you know if there was continued access throughout, or were there any?
I think there were certainly some discontinuities in access as we sort of transition to remote access. Yeah.
Yeah, I think really our projects hit around the 5-year mark, but there are differences, and I think we'll bring this up later too, but it's probably important to discuss and kind of shore up our extension policies so all of the information needed is clear in our in the forms that are submitted. So that's good information that there were some lapses. Any other questions or comments on this? Concerns? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, extension 6, UTD 099. Questions, comments, concerns from the board?
This again, it looks like it's a 6-year request. And again, we've usually had 5 at the most.
Hi, this is Jack Mountjoy on the project. Greg Branch, I believe in his temporary authority during the pandemic, was allowed to have a 9-month pandemic extension. So this project received that. And this is now just the final 1-year, 5th-year extension, according to what would have been the original timeline, plus the 9-month pandemic extension.
Other questions? Motion to approve?
This is Rodney Andrews. I motion to approve.
Kathy, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Making a note for it. All right, extension 7, UTD 110. Any comments or questions from the board? Thank you for,
I guess I was a little curious why there was a whole year and a half gap from 2020 to now.
This is a proposal that was brought forth by an individual from out of the United States. So part of it was that they needed to find a research assistant in the US that could do the work for them. And that, in addition to the pandemic, resulted in this gap.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
a motion to approve.
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
I second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Kathy, you're gonna have to continue to keep me honest about this mic. I am not used to using a mic right in front of my face, so in the room it sounds very loud, which is why I keep moving away from it. All right, so extension 8, UTD 117. Any questions or comments from board? Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve, Celeste.
A second?
Second. I second, Kathy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Extension 9, UH008. Questions or comments on the board? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Rodney Andrews. I motion to approve.
This is Celeste. I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Extension 10, UH006. Questions or comments from the board? I have a motion to approve.
This is Rodney Andrews. Motion to approve.
I second. This is Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Oh, that's the end of extensions. All right, moving on to the next agenda item. Consideration and possible action to approve new research projects. So we will start with proposal 1, including remote access, UTA 173, assessing effects of the STAR master products using quasi-experimental methods. Are there any researchers here who want to talk about the project?
Yes, I'm present. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Whitney Cade. So this is a quasi-experimental study to better understand the impacts of the STAR master products, which there are a few of those, which are fairly widely used programs across the state of Texas.
you. Are there any questions, comments, concerns from the board? I did have one question. How are you able to identify which schools use StarMaster? Is ECS providing you a list of districts that purchased it, or okay?
Yes, we have a full list of all districts that have purchased, including which products as well. So
Is it by district or school?
I believe it is both by district and school. So we will need to drop that into our folder.
Any other questions? A motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
Celeste, a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes. Congratulations. So proposal 2, UTA 174, including remote access. Can districts grow their own diverse supply of teachers? Evidence from Texas. Are any researchers on?
Yes, Danielle Edwards. So we're looking to evaluate Texas's Grow Your Own program on its effects on schools and districts, as well as follow the career trajectories of those who participate throughout the teacher pipeline.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes, I have one question. You explained when doing the causal analysis between districts who received the grants and those that didn't. Are you going to use some kind of matching criteria between the two groups so that they can be comparable?
Yeah, so who we're going to compare is actually, we've talked to the Grow Your Own team, and we've applied for supplemental data on who applied for the grant. So our comparison group are those who applied for the grant and didn't get it. So that's what makes them comparable, is that they're both motivated, and we're going to use a differences in differences design as proposed. So we assume that these two groups would have had the same outcomes in absence of the grant for those who want it.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
I had one follow-up question. Have the researchers already discussed with TEA receiving the GYO data?
Yes, we had a meeting with the GYO team last week, as well as some people involved with the data there, and they're very aware of our request and have helped us facilitate what we needed to ask for. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Rodney Andrews. My motion to approve.
This is Kathy. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes for proposal 2, including remote access. Proposal 3, including remote access, UTA 175, using item response data to better represent and understand student learning. Are there any researchers on?
Hi everyone, I'm Jesse Bruin. I'm with the research team. I believe my co-author Mike is on as well. So, would you like us to say a few words about the project?
Sure, please, thanks.
Great, fantastic. So the core idea behind this project is a belief that a lot of the ways that test scores are used to guide educational practice neglects important information contained in the raw student item responses. So we've executed a proof of concept demonstrating this using some publicly available item data from Massachusetts. And just to give you an example of the kind of pattern we're talking about, in that data, we find that the most difficult item on the 10th grade mathematics exam was a word problem. And if you look across all the other items on the 2 exams given that year, the question that most predicts a student's success on that math question is their performance on the reading exam, suggesting that what the student really struggled with was their ability to triage the question and extract the math problem from the word content. We want to use modern machine learning methods to isolate patterns like this in the data and develop new and complementary measures of student learning that can be used to guide educational practice and instruction, and see how those measures are linked to long-term outcomes like high school graduation, college going, and earnings and income. Happy to answer more questions, and thank you all for considering the proposal too.
Thanks. Do I have any questions or comments from the board members?
Yes, I just wanted to make a clarification on the UI wage data. You wanted to get the residence county for the people in the study, but unfortunately, none of the address, like the county or the zip code information in the wage data is really usable for that.
Okay.
It's associated with the employers, but even at that, it's not really reliable, because if one employer had multiple locations, that may only be their headquarters address.
I see. Thank you for letting us know. I think we see we were thinking about that as a potential outcome to look at things like mobility, but I think that is sort of a secondary covariate relative to some of the other core things we were planning to explore.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's just, unfortunately, it's a limitation of that data that you just really can't use that for anything.
Thank you.
I had a question for Linda Rosca, probably, about the availability of all of this test information. Is that the layout information and some responses are available?
I'm sorry, was the question for me or?
No, for our TEA board.
Okay.
Right, I've already passed this request on to the assessment team to see what we do have available. We do have some file layouts available. I'm not sure if we have all of them. I'm not sure we have the format tied to the items in our assessment files, so that may be lacking.
I did have a question also about, you mentioned absences and disciplinary actions used as possibly intermediary outcomes. So I wondered if you could discuss a little more about how looking at
Sure.
item
So
responses relates to those outcomes.
Yeah, I think we're taking a big picture view on how to take this sort of raw data that you have that's already available and extract the most useful signal out of that data that we can to guide our understanding of where students stand in their educational pathway. If it turns out that there are certain questions within the item data that do an exceptionally good job of predicting school discipline, it suggests that there may be ways of constructing measures within the item response data that can guide, educators, parents, teachers, school administrators on identifying and intervening with students that may be at risk of some kind of school disciplinary action. So as a really simple example, for young kids, for example, if they're struggling with reading, that may lead to sort of like outbursts in the classroom. And so if we find systematic patterns between school discipline and, reading responses within the or questions that involve a lot of reading within the ELA exam, then that strikes me as something that could be useful for policymakers.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the researcher? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Rodney Andrews. I motion to approve.
This is Adam Leonard. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Sorry, did I hear someone oppose?
No, that was Jesse saying thank you.
Okay. All right, motion passes with remote access. Thank you. Move on to proposal 4. With remote access, UTA 176. Do we have any researchers here to discuss?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone. My name's Cody Tuttle. First, just let me say thanks very much for your time. We're requesting remote access for a project about the effect of education on a variety of non-pecuniary outcomes. So things like criminal convictions, voter registration, public benefit use, and family structure. So things like marriage, divorce, births. We think this is important because there's a large literature documenting the positive employment and earnings benefits of education, but there's less works that studies these non-pecuniary benefits. And so we plan to study these questions by linking data from outside sources to the ERC, and then using the empirical strategies of several existing papers, all of which use the Texas ERC data to consider these non-pecuniary outcomes. And so the idea is that these existing papers document causal effects of various policies on college enrollment, type of school attended, college graduation, and we want to use those exogenous shifts in education and study how they affect this suite of non-pecuniary outcomes. I should also note that we did not include the course taking variables in our initial proposal. So if it's not too much trouble, I'd also like to propose amending the data request to include that course complete element from 1993 to present. But that's the gist of it. So happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
And I just wanted to add, this is Celeste, that we may need to address, this is kind of in Linda's realm. They, TEA just recently stopped some of the data and now has a new one called the course roster. And so I didn't know if people don't know to request it, if they've already gotten access to, say, the linked student teacher linkage, can we then allow them to have the new data, given that it's replacing some of the previous ones? And that what I'm saying is Cody might need to request not only the course complete in the previous, P class enroll if he wants to link, but also the new class roster. So Linda, I don't know if we want to create, how we're going to deal with that.
Right. I'm looking at the data elements on starting on page 15 and 16. Is that correct in your proposal?
Yes, that's correct.
I don't see a request for the class roster links students and teachers. So I don't see that data requested at all. I heard a request for course completion data, which is.
That's correct. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I
didn't mean that's all you
lost my thought. So
okay, my bad. So I think for this project we don't need the linking variables. I didn't want to run over what Celeste was trying to say, but at least for this specific example, we don't need the linking variable. So I think we just need P course complete.
Okay,
in addition
that's
to
great.
whatever is already there.
Perfect.
That's a good point, though, Celeste. We do need to consider how to handle that.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'm kind of curious about the name date of birth linking, only just, I guess we'll say professionally. Because one of the things that we, when we try to do this, that comes up, of course, is that over time, females are more likely to change their name due to changes in marital status. And so I'm imagining that a lot of the education records are going to be, that you're, comparing to, are going to be based on maiden names, shall we say, the original names. And then over time, some of the data that you're linking to it being more recent, maybe at a point in their life where their names changed and whatnot. And I don't know whether this is the case, but do marriage records have that linkage in them that show the old and the new name that you can use to crosswalk? Or is this just going to be a limitation in what you're able to do?
Yes, they do. Sorry, this is Emily. I'm also on the project with Cody. The marriage records do have the pre-marriage name for both parties. So, and then you can also, of course, see the partner's last name. So you could check both of those for possible linkages.
Exactly. All right, cool. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me know. That's interesting.
I just have one other question. It mentions on the list of data elements requested using the OOB for controls such as SAT and top 10%, and just wanted to mention that that is only for students applying to universities. So if you want to include a wider swath of students who may not have applied, I would suggest also adding the CBM 002, which has other types of indicators of college readiness that could be used as controls. But you might have thought about that. Just wanted to see what you thought of that.
I think we would definitely be open to including that. I know that the reason we listed the CMOOB, I think a lot of it was probably related to this top 10 status, because we're going to be using one of the empirical strategies from Sandy Black, Jeff, and Jesse Rothstein's paper. But we'd be happy to add the other things if you think those are important controls.
I mean, it's up to you if you think it's important. It's just worth noting that that information is only there for students who applied to a public university.
Thanks for noting that. I think we should add it then, because we did add this partly for controls as we put in there. So I think it's a good idea to add the other elements too. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Then, do I have a motion for approval with the addition of a request for course completion, TEA course completion data, and TAGCB 002 data? Let me know if I missed anything. I think those were the two I noted need to be added.
This is Kathy. I move to approve with the addition of course completion and 002 data.
This is Celeste. I second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Motion passes. Thank you to the researchers for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Proposal 5, including remote access UT Austin 177. Have any researchers on the call who would like to give us an overview?
Paul and I are here. Paul's going to take the lead. Kim Flam here.
Oh, Paul, a second ago.
I see Paul. Paul, you there? Oh dear.
Oh, I wonder if you.
Paul says he's having trouble with his mic.
Oh, okay.
So I guess that means I have to pinch hit. Okay.
Take a stab.
So let me just take. Unfortunately, Paul is the education expert. I'm the broadband expert. And this proposal actually is a proposal we're really excited about. It's a really interesting subject. So as you know, COVID made a big change in the way that education was conducted in Texas schools last year. And obviously there was a lot of students going online and doing remote learning. And there's been a lot of study so far, or people are starting to study, I should say, how going online affected student performance. And the initial indications just from the overall tabulations of data suggest that there was some loss of student performance in terms of as an outcome. One of the interesting things that was going on, however, is that there was also a pretty major, this is kind of my sphere, there was a pretty major improvement in broadband access for educational use going on in certain parts of Texas during this time period. And one of the things, the issues that we're really interested in, and I think the TEA and actually everyone with a kid in a school in Texas ought to be interested in too, is how improved access to broadband and the quality of the infrastructure that was made available to students affected learning loss. That is, if, for example, students who had improved access to broadband that allowed better responsiveness in remote learning sessions had less learning loss than students in environments where there was remote learning, but there was very little improvement in broadband access. So given that this aspect of the digital divide closed significantly in Texas during this period, this is a really interesting topic and one with considerable policy relevance, since of course we're all going to be thinking about whether the changes in broadband infrastructure and other pandemic related responses, some of those things may alter permanently the way we think about connecting students and doing learning. And this is kind of a first step to understanding what exactly happened with learning loss that was mediated by this change in broadband in Texas during the period of the pandemic. We're very excited about the topic. We're also going to be asking the TEA for their data on whether students were actually online or remote during the pandemic. That's another essential part of our data request. Although our understanding is that at the school campus or district level, that data is actually not confidential. But we hope to do this at the student level and get greater insight on variation within schools in student learning. Pleased to answer any questions if I can. As I said, Paul's the education expert. I'm merely the broadband guy, but I'll try as best as I can to pinch hit here. Oh, it looks like Paul has access. Paul, can you talk? No, his mic's still not working apparently. Sorry about that.
And I was just going to add that although we haven't received that crisis code data, we hear it's on the way. So they are requesting that.
That's great. Thank you very much. I hope they're as excited as we are by the prospect of delving into this issue.
Right. I can't speak to TEA's excitement, but I can tell you that we're providing the discrete attendance data showing remote or in person, and that's already at the ERCs in the 6-week data. So the data request that y'all made of TEA that you asked for campus and district level data that was not confidential because you made a PIR for it, you can derive those same percentages by the data that are already in the ERCs. So I don't think we need to provide anything additional for you. You should have everything you have, you need and that are asking for in your data request.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Linda, I think. Linda, for the spring 2021 STAR scores, for students who weren't part of the testing, I guess I have a question to check my memory. Was it the case that students who were remote learners in spring 2021 were among those who were, I'm going to use the word exempt, I'm not sure that's the correct word, but were the ones not, were not expected to test if they weren't in person? Is that accurate? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think the expectation was that all students were supposed to test, but if if you didn't come on campus to test, you were not tested.
So
is that what you were thinking of?
Yes, I think that's not my question. So I guess my question then back to this research team is how that may implicate the work you're trying to do specifically around spring 2021 work.
That's an excellent point, and one we've been thinking about. The issue you're raising is selection, clearly, selection bias as to who took the test and who didn't show up on campus to take the test. And we're to deal with that issue, we're clearly going to have to include some kind of either implicit or explicit selection model. But we believe we have data that will allow us. We know, for example, that we have considerable data on things that affected broadband quality upgrade during the period. And we also hope to get some additional covariates, external covariates, that will allow us to model the selection issue you're raising.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Thank you for the question. Very good point.
It appears Paul is asking some questions.
I believe this is for the ERC to discuss what types of aggregates can be taken out of the ERC.
Yes, he's making the point that I think that the aggregates that we will construct are not exportable as public data, whereas the files posted by the TEA are in fact already public, if I got that right.
So I guess if it's back to me, they can only be released if they are masked.
Right.
FERPA compliant.
Right. I think your options are to mask them and make them compliant, or I guess you can ask TEA to create those and then put them in the ERC, and then you can take them out. So yes, those are your options.
Great. Maybe we can revisit the issue when we are further along in constructing the specific measures that we're going to be using.
That sounds great. I'm not right. I think it's probably not relevant. Everything you need is in your request right now. So I think we can move forward with the item.
Good. Thank you very much.
Great. Any other questions or comments from the board? Do I have a motion for approval?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
This is Rodney. I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, moving to proposal 6, including remote access request, UTA 178. Any researchers on that would like to give an overview?
Yes, hi, this is Lynn Malore. I'm representing this project. This is a proposal for a study to better understand the transfer credits for students who earn dual enrollment credits in high school.
Great, thank you. I have a quick comment. I wondered if requesting the higher ed OOS information would be helpful, since that has the higher ed indicator of what the student made in the class for dual credit, whereas that's not in the TEA course files. I know the TEA course files indicate whether it was a dual credit course, but there is a corresponding higher ed record for that as well that may be helpful.
Okay, yeah, that was my question too also. Just trying to understand if I would get more information out of the transcript file, the 00S versus the, TA's course completion and also the 002 files or 001 files. So yeah, if that's your recommendation, I'll take it. And we'll switch to those data sets or add those data sets.
Yeah, so that would just be adding CBM 00S. Is that what you're saying, Melissa?
Yep. Yes, correct. Any other questions or comments from the board? This project. All right, do I have a motion for approval of the project with remote access upon the addition of requests for OOS data?
I motion that we approve the project.
With the CBM OOS data.
With the additional data request.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Proposal 7, UTD 154. Proposal 7, including remote access, UTD 154. Do I have any researchers here who want to give an overview?
Hi, Trey Miller with UTD, Associate Professor of Economics at UTD. I also have Rodney Andrews and Holly Koswitz from UTD joining, and Melissa Martinez at Texas State is another researcher on this project. And we're excited to share that we recently learned that we're going to get funding from Greater Texas Foundation for this work. But this project is or the motivation for this project is the fact that everyone on the call here is aware of that, part-time students, research has shown that students enrolled part-time have very, poor college outcomes. They're unlikely to persist in college, unlikely to complete, and this has been well documented. And so the policy prescription has generally been to encourage students to enroll full-time. And, this is something that we think after, kind of talking with administrators over the years and engaging in research and talking with students, that just isn't in the cards for a large number of community college students in the state, in Texas. And it's particularly problematic because 2/3 of students enrolled in the state's community college system are enrolled part-time currently. And they're much more likely to be non-traditional students in the sense of being underrepresented minorities, first-generation college students, et cetera. So, this project is really to try to understand why students enroll part-time and what challenges they face, and examine, and try to end up with some areas for innovation to support part-time college students or students that must enroll in college part-time. So this is a mixed method study, but a large component of this will draw on ERC data to try to better understand the population of part-time college students in Texas, understand, kind of patterns in enrollment and success, and some of the factors that we can observe in the ERC data that might lead to, going through stints of part-time enrollment and perhaps back to full-time status. And then that'll be complemented, and a large component of this will be a qualitative study where we talk with students and administrators to, kind of understand some of the challenges that students face, and some areas where the supports might benefit them and help them succeed. So.
Great, thanks. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Great, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve proposal 7.
I second. This is Kathy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, proposal 8, including remote access, UTD 155. Do I have anyone here to give an overview of this project?
Yes, hi, my name is Renzo Soto, and I'm with Texas 2036, and I'm joined by my fellow researchers and colleagues at the Texas Schools Project on this particular application. And as an overview, we here at Texas 2036 are developing a publicly accessible online simulator tool to rapidly project the impact of proposed changes to our state's community college funding system, and to help facilitate the discussions and recommendations of the Commission on Community College Finance that was established by Senate Bill 1230 just this past legislative regular session. As the state's commission convenes, our organization aims for the tool to be informed by and responsive to the commission's discussions. We're seeking to incorporate a set of indicators calculated using ERC data into the simulator, and the indicators are going to be reviewed for FERPA compliance and aggregated prior to being extracted from the ERC and incorporated in the tool. For transparency, we also want to say that the aggregated indicators will be made available for download by interested parties. And as noted in our application, we commit to giving the coordinating board, Higher Education Coordinating Board, advanced written notice of the FERPA compliant aggregated data that's going to be included in the public version of the tool. As for our research plan, we've developed a beta version using aggregated data from the coordinating board's data websites to develop a baseline for simulations of different funding scenarios through the state's current community college funding formulas. We've identified 4 broad simulation categories to provide insight into the 3 research questions in our application. And those are recognition of community college contributions to workforce needs, recognition of contributions to students' education and transfer needs, accounting for services to disadvantaged students, and accounting for potential instability in enrollment and performance. As outlined in our application, the first 3 categories propose to use ERC data. And as I mentioned, we're grateful to be collaborating with the Texas Schools Project as researchers on this project to help us understand and provide guidance on which data is best to develop this tool simulations and to ensure FERPA compliance and aggregation of the data. ERC student level data is crucial to our project because the data sources we are currently using from the coordinating board's public websites are limited in their ability to accurately model simulations outside of existing community college funding sources and formula structures. The aggregated FERPA compliant student and campus level data from the ERC are best situated to model simulations of funding disbursement mechanisms that aren't currently part of the finance system, because that data, as y'all know, tracks actual student progress and performance. And we believe we can benefit education in Texas by maximizing the potential to achieve a positive student and equity-oriented outcome through the Commission on Community College Finance. And it's going to be important for policymakers, institutional leaders, and advocates to understand the financial implications of the funding system modifications that the commission is going to consider. Typically, we know that this procedure for modifying state level financial formulas involves developing an idea and then waiting days or even weeks for projections on how state costs and institutional recipients will be impacted. Our simulator proposes to shorten this process to a matter of seconds. It's also going to center the conversation on what matters the most for those ultimately served by the system, that is Texas higher education students, and the outcomes that matter to them. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for this overview. One question I had is, are just based on bios and what the explanation of roles, do Mr. Richmond and Mr. Soto need access to the actual student level data? Will they be the ones running?
No, we will not. It will exclusively be Dr. Andrews and Dr. Miller handling the data. And then all we will receive at the Texas 2036 side is going to be everything that's already FERPA compliant and aggregated.
Then I would suggest revising the remote access request to remove.
To remove our names?
Yes.
Okay. We can
If all
certainly
you will
do
be
that.
seeing is the FERPA compliant aggregate data, then. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I had just one. We had the previous ERP project that was also working with the Texas 2036, and I just wanted to make sure that the coordinating board felt that the guidelines in this proposal were adequate, given that we shut down the other project.
Yes, and what we have discussed is looking at the data that's being taken out of the ERC and submitted for the simulator, and that's currently written into the proposal, which we appreciate. So it will be coming through the coordinating board before being put into any publicly available. And then currently, if the remote access form is revised, then it is only Trey, Rodney, and Mark who will have access to the actual student level data itself. Am I correct, Trey and Rodney?
Yes.
Good.
Thanks for the question, Celeste. Any other questions or comments?
Melissa, one issue I noticed with the proposal was we should have asked, I think, for FADS data as well, so we can, kind of look at implications of, students with different levels of financial aid and things like that, if that comes up amongst the, the commission. And so we were wondering if, we could submit a revised proposal, given that we're, going to revise the remote access request as well.
Or any other thoughts from the board about that? Right, then do I have a motion for approval upon addition of a revised remote access request and the addition of FAD data request?
This is Adam. I'll make that motion.
Second, this is Celeste.
You all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Good
Thank you
discussion.
thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on to Proposal 9, UTD 156, including remote access. Is there anyone here to give us an overview?
My name is Caitlin Heath, and thank you all for your time. My co-author Brianna Wallace is also here on this call. We're proposing to study the effects of special education participation on crime. One of the goals of special education in general is to prepare adults or students for success in adulthood, and we view adult crime as an important and interesting indicator of adult success. So to implement this study, we're proposing linking the ERC data to publicly available adult criminal conviction data. And we're going to examine this question of special education participation's effects on crime using a difference in differences methodology, utilizing a policy change that took place in 2004, which led to policy-driven changes in special education program participation. Overall, it's our hope that this study will help uncover the relationship between special education investments and crime-related outcomes, as well as potentially help policymakers better understand the various costs and benefits of special education services.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
So when I was reading through this, it seemed to me like there was almost 4 groups that you have to be ready to look at. Your group of people who went through special education and did or didn't commit a crime, or 2 of them, but then the people who didn't go through special ed and did or didn't, commit a crime or convicted of a crime, whatever standard you're using in that regard. I mean, it seems like there's 4, potential major cohorts here, right?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Like, what do you're gonna look for the impact of special education on crime, and so you have to compare that to something. Is that just comparing it to the places where special education isn't offered, or is it more where special education wasn't actually selected by the family?
Oh, I see. Okay. So we're going to utilize a policy change which took place in 2004, which led to reductions in special education participation. So we'll use like a difference in differences strategy. So we'll have students in districts more intensely affected by this policy compared to students in districts less intensely affected by the policy before and after the policy change, as a way to investigate students who were losing access to special education.
That now I get it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Related to that, sorry, do you want to go, Melissa?
No, go ahead, Linda.
Okay. What is the practical application of this study for K-12 educators and policymakers? The policy that you were discussing is no longer in place. So how would we use this information?
Absolutely. I think that, so Brianna and I have a couple of previous papers that have looked at the effects of special education on education-related outcomes. It's absolutely true that this policy is no longer in place. We think that this is provides a really unique opportunity to take advantage of a policy change that happened, but likely wouldn't happen again, in order to better understand the costs and benefits of special education services. So in general, on average, special education students cost about twice as much to educate as their general education peers. But in our prior work, we've shown that special education students, some students actually benefit from special education services and some students don't. And actually, although special education is meant to provide additional instruction and support for students with disabilities, if students are not necessarily appropriately classified for special education, then that would be a really important thing to understand, because not only is it costly, but maybe they'd also be better off without special ed services. So I guess that kind of leads us to this broader point of there's more left to learn about the effects of special ed programs and services and how it impacts students in adulthood. And I think it can help us better better provide special ed services in the future and figure out who really benefits and in what ways.
And just to add to what Caitlin said, one of the primary goals of special education programs is to prepare individuals for success in adulthood. And so we kind of see this as being beneficial for K through 12 policymakers to understand the true, like another aspect of adulthood that's not related to educational attainment, as being useful for understanding the benefits of special ed.
So districts are required to offer special education. So can you give me one practical application of the results of this study?
I think that it's true that students are required to receive special education services, those who need it. The process of getting into special education varies widely across districts and schools. And it's very subjective depending on the disability type that students have. And so there's a lot that we can learn about providing special ed services to marginal students. So perhaps if we learn more about there being a benefit to special ed services in adulthood, we learn about a certain type of student who's benefiting from special education services, in a way that's not being picked up just by looking at test score outcomes. So for example, special ed students can receive accommodated or modified versions of standardized exams, and it's difficult to know whether special ed is benefiting a particular student just by looking at test scores if all that's really happening is their test scores are improving because of accommodations or modifications. So we think that we could learn more about what students benefit from special ed by looking at outcomes beyond just, by looking at longer run outcomes beyond K through 12.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I still haven't heard a practical application and how this would benefit Texas. Is anybody else on the board hearing that? And I'm just, if someone could just explain that to me. I'm not hearing it, so I don't understand how this study would benefit Texas schools or students.
I think that if we, oh, sorry, go ahead, Brent. Did you?
Oh, yeah, I could just try to add a sentence. Currently, Texas schools are spending a lot of money on special education services. And so truly understanding how these additional investments are having longer term impacts is important for understanding, the costs and benefits of these investments. So for instance, if we find that special education is doing a lot to reduce adult crime and perhaps behavioral outcomes later on, it suggests like on this component, special education services are targeting students and helping them in the long run, versus if we don't find that there's any link between special education and behavior and crime, this could also be kind of useful for policymakers to know as special education programs are designed and developed, and different types of services are provided to target different kinds of success in adulthood. I don't know if that helps, and I can try to elaborate a little bit more.
Well, we're required to offer special education services using federal funds. The design of the programs, that's not part of your study. So I don't get it, but for me, this does not have a benefit, but so I'm going to defer to the rest of the board on this item.
To offer in relationship to what Linda's articulating, that I think the proposal could be strengthened by further explanation in the narrative itself about how, in a really detailed contemporary policy context, this work, and I absolutely hear the points you're making, Brianna and Caitlin. It may be much more helpful to understand in a very contemporary policy frame what the outcomes are likely to contribute to Linda's point, to a very bounded set of responsibilities districts have, both under state and federal law. And I hear you articulated that. It just may be more helpful to have that in narrative form.
I could definitely add that for sure. I think, I'm not sure if it's helpful to try and add any additional explanation now. Services, so providing special education is definitely, of course, mandated by the federal government. What we found in prior research is that some students are marginal, so like they have very mild disabilities, and there's a lot of variation in what tests are administered to evaluate students for special education services. So we view that as a process that varies widely, and as far as implementation goes, across schools and districts. And so we'd really love to learn about what some of the benefits are for those sort of marginal cases of students, as these are students who are not necessarily guaranteed one way or the other to be in special education.
So is it Linda, that it is appropriate, I think, to focus where we have in the past approved projects that examine the effects of education on non-pecuniary outcomes. Certainly, looking at the effects of education on crime sort of falls into that. Is that not sufficiently articulated in the proposal?
I think from my questions, I'm not understanding how TEA, for example, might use the results from this study to create policy or change practice in K-12.
What I'm hearing is it might be helpful to ask the researchers to bolster this discussion in the proposal for how the specific work could be a benefit to Texas, because, you know, I'm hearing everyone talking, but I understand what Linda's saying about the fact that this is something that's required of schools to offer. So how could what is being found affect what happens on the ground? So I just wonder if we could, one solution would be postpone this and ask the researchers to bolster this, include it in the background, and then specifically the part of benefit for Texas section. Any other board members have thoughts about this?
I just would like clear direction for scholars, for the scholars, and certainly the reason for providing access to these data is to benefit education in Texas. And I understand that these programs are required, but even given that something is required, I still think it is useful to understand the ramifications of a required program on outcomes that are not normally considered. To say that these are some additional benefits that flow from offering these services. And so, I think to make it useful, would like us to articulate, what we would like to see from these scholars.
May I add a process question / wondering? If we were to, as an example, request, to use your language, Melissa, a bolstering of the narrative on the specific section on utility, I'm sorry, I don't have it open in front of me, but essentially the section on utility to Texas policy, because that seems to be where this conversation has centered. Rather than potentially, rather than postpone to the next cycle, is there a mechanism for us to, if folks were open, for example, consider this, to offer a tentative approval or a, I don't even know what the language would be, but something that would allow us to receive that updated narrative and consider it in advance of a full term next cycle as a secondary option.
I think the options are, and based on talking with our legal counsel about how we can do these things, if it's going to require another review and approval by all the board members, we would have to do that in a meeting. So there would be the option of possibly doing a special called board meeting. I think that's something that is possibly a good idea anyway, judging by some of the things we were going to talk about board operating procedures, and also I've heard from some of you about the backlog of proposals. So that would be an option, but the only way we could say conditionally accept, which I know is a change from how we've done it in the past, but moving forward, the only way we can conditionally accept in this meeting is if it's okay for you not to have to look at again and approve. That approval and of the proposal needs to happen in a open meeting.
Thanks for that clarification.
I think on some of the other ones where we approved and said, well, you're going to pull your name off of the remote access because those two people don't need access, things like that. That's what you mean by we can conditionally approve those because that's an objective decision as to how the change is going to occur. Whereas here, we're kind of looking for more narrative, I guess, and argument in favor. And therefore, that's the kind of thing that's more of a judgment call and for us to react to. Which is why you're suggesting that if we go that route, it's going to need to be through a second public meeting.
And even, to Rodney's point, if we decide that there needs to be some revision of this, I think we need to provide some specific guidance on what should be added. But let me hear from the board. Do you think this is the way to go? Are we wanting to request a revision or?
Well, one thing that we had discussed earlier, Melissa and I, is that we might need an off-cycle meeting. So the good news is it wouldn't be a whole quarter away if we wanted to request to relook at this. It might not be that long of a period. I don't know if that is helpful for the project.
I think I'm the only one who's unsure of the value of this proposal. So maybe you take a vote and see how that goes.
Do that. Anyone else has anything to say? I'll go ahead and move forward. Do I have a motion to approve Proposal 9 with remote access?
This is Rodney Andrews, a motion that we approve.
I have a second. Right, then I think we might need to discuss what to do. That we are going to ask the researchers to provide some revision. Let's give a little more guidance on this then.
I think we needed a more articulated discussion about the benefits of this research and whatever it finds in terms of actions that can be taken, whether it's at the school district level or by TEA or others, to improve education in Texas, right? That's the question that Linda has brought up. It's like, okay, if we find something here, what's the potential lever we can pull to resolve it or to reduce its impact or whatever. That wasn't entirely clear. And so if that was clearer, and you could perhaps do it in the case of some hypothetical examples of what you might find and therefore what the potential implications and possible considerations that organizations might want to make, that might help us see it better.
Certainly. But so articulate those benefits, but there are certainly cases where sort of K through 12 education interacts with the criminal justice system. Should the authors sort of highlight those? Because I think, these are things that we're also interested in. I'm just trying to, I want for them to have sort of a clear set of directions sort of going forward, because, to be clear, I recognize that the benefits of education certainly beyond the credential in the labor market. So I would, like sort of turn to Linda for some specific guidance on the elements that she would like to see that would make her feel more comfortable with the revised proposal.
Did the researchers answer the question of what practical application this might have at K-12? They mentioned something about program design and program design changes. I didn't see anything in the proposal about program design. And as we discussed, the policy that's being studied has already been changed. So, so I'm not sure where the value is in that respect. So I'm asking for what is the benefit to Texas? And I don't feel like I have to answer that question. This isn't my proposal.
Yeah, we will try to incorporate that. I hope it was clear from the proposal, like our intention was not to evaluate this policy change. It was more kind of, abstracting away from the policy change, use it to learn something about special education investments on these like other outcomes, such as crime. So it doesn't really have to do much with the policy change in that it helps us study the causal link between special education and crime, which is like very difficult to get at. But maybe we can make it more clear in the proposal, like our intention is not really to like evaluate this change. I don't know, do you agree with that, Caitlin?
Oh, yes. I think so. It sounds like what Linda's asking for is if we knew that special education benefited or didn't benefit adult crime, like then what would we do with that information? And is that a correct characterization?
Thank you, Caitlin. Very good. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think that's a great question. And I'm sorry that didn't come through in our proposal, and we can definitely work to make that clear. I don't want to take up too much more of your time trying to like explain it here and now if that's not desired. But I think that our intention is, to definitely, like, if we knew more about how special education impacts crime, then we think that's like really beneficial to understanding the benefits of providing special education services and the things that can do to help interactions even within school about like discipline outcomes and interactions with the DAPE, the alternate education programs. So we can definitely add that to our proposal.
I think please keep in mind that we're required to offer it. So it's not a choice of offer it or don't offer it. Districts have to offer it. So what is the proposal that, what would we do with this information? Offer special ed? Well, we have to. Like, I guess that's what I'm getting at is what would I do with this information?
Sure. Well, yes, we'll expand more on this in the proposal. I think that we sort of, let's see, I don't want to misspeak on this one. We kind of view it as things like, a benefit of education in general. I think I'll pause there and either defer to Brenna or we'll add that to be more clear in the proposal.
Thank you for this discussion. One thing I will also add is during the revision, and I might have missed it, let me know, but there's a lot of higher ed data being requested. And I noticed in the proposal, it only mentions attendance and attainment as the intermediate outcomes, but the data that's being requested is, course taking, marketable skills, outcomes, things like that. So either I would say maybe you don't need that data or be clear about how that fits into your research question.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you all. We'll postpone this and see the revision at our next board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have 3 computers in front of me and no clocks. 2:37. So we could either push through to 3, try to get through the agenda, or if we need to, I'm happy to propose a 5-minute break. Board members, feelings on this?
I can keep going.
I was going to say, I'm used to sitting in this chair for 8 hours at a time.
Right then.
Keep it rolling.
We Zoom all the time.
I'm fine.
Let's do it. All right, so proposal 10, including remote access UTD 157. Any researchers here to give an overview?
I'm here to represent the project. I'm Sharda Dharmashankar, and thanks for your time. So this project wants to think about what the academic impacts of changes in school district structure are, either through annexations, potential closures, and mergers. What I want to look at is what the long and the short-term implications are of school district consolidation. For younger students, this might include things like attendance and test scores, and for older students, it could include graduation rates, college enrollment, and for those who choose perhaps not to go to school, what the labor market implications are. What my project is adding is thinking carefully about what the mechanisms are that could relate to student outcomes as a result of district mergers. Do students perhaps change schools? Are there changes in faculty and administration that accompany these changes? What happens to tax rates? The methods that I'm hoping to use are just off-the-shelf descriptive and regression analyses, particularly looking at a difference in differences design, comparing districts that undergo consolidations to those that are very similarly characterized based on observables, but who don't end up undergoing a consolidation. So that's the overview of the project. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members?
I just want to kind of point out that this seems huge. I mean, it's a huge project to look at what you're doing, but also the amount of data, basically, I think is the entire ERC database. And I wasn't sure if all of it was needed, and whether the whole time frame was needed through all this. You know, even things like continuing education, and SPEC, I wasn't sure why you needed teacher certification, things like that.
I'm happy to remove some of those. That was mostly for assessing what kinds of teachers might end up moving across schools or into certain districts. The higher education outcomes, such as I know you talked about like post-secondary type things, was to see if there were any long run implications, but that might be very long run. So I'm also happy to cut some of that data.
I can't speak to the K-12 necessarily, but I actually was going to suggest adding a data set for if one of your outcomes is, where is it, course taking? And I believe you requested, if the question is, will students select more intensive courses of study in higher ed? Right now, only the 004, the class report, is requested, which is not student level. So if you would like to look at the outcome of course taking, you would have to add the 00S.
Okay.
Or you would, so if that's an outcome that's important to you, then I would suggest amending it to add the request for the 00S.
Okay, so maybe a way to amend it that also addresses Celeste's concerns would be to, if need be, like remove the SPEC and to add the course taking outcomes at the student level, and to cut out the very, very long run, like higher education reports. I don't know if that's appropriate or if it's okay to keep it, or.
If we can be specific about it right now, then we can approve it with those specific changes right now. So let's try to nail that down. So what I heard is removing SPEC from the list.
Mm-hmm.
adding the CBM OOS. And what the third thing you said was the longer term.
So,
Sorry, you'll have to remind me.
yes, Celeste, also correct me and jump in if I'm.
Yeah, I was just even thinking resident fellows. We rarely have people request that. I'm not clear how that would fit in here. You know, and continuing ed, I just don't see the direct effect on district consolidation and looking at continuing education.
Yeah. Like I was thinking, that was just like a, for high school students, that's like a 4 or 5 year down the line, long-term and dynamic implication. But so to be specific, then I can remove SBAC, remove the THECB report A, and remove the report R, right?
Well, the A does give you enrollment in continuing ed, if that is something you are interested in.
Oh, thinking about
like
community
interested in
college.
enrollment in general, I would say you could keep the A because that is a type of enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer term, like the R, yes, that's post-grad medical degree information. Celeste, I don't know if I'm.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so removing SBEC, removing the CBM OOR. And adding the CBM OOS. Did I get that?
And Linda, does the TEA data okay with you?
Seen a couple of consolidation studies like this, and they do ask, or they did use a lot of the data over time. But thank you for checking.
The only thing I wanted to bring up was when I looked at the proposal, I came away with the impression that we were hoping to use wage records to in kind of more of a labor market way, so not specific to individual people, but more broadly, perhaps in terms of looking at employment levels and earning amounts over time. And you can't do that you can do that for the state, but the location data or the address information is not specific to where the workplace is, where the worker is, et cetera. In fact, in many cases, it's out of state because it's essentially a point of contact address, and it's an out of state agent who is handling their wage record submissions. So, I mean, it's not a no, like I'm saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that's probably not going to serve your purpose. If that's what you were hoping to do. Now, we do have labor market information, obviously, on our website that does tell the story about employment and earnings over time and allows you to drill in by geography and such, which would be, it's outside the ERC, it's freely available data. So just as an alternative, if that's critical to your need, and maybe it's a way to get there.
Okay.
Wait, do I have a motion to approve proposal 10 with remote access with the amendment to remove the request for SBEC and CBM OOR data and add request for CBM OOS data?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
Adam, second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, great, motion passes. Thank you. Good luck with your research. Okay, moving on to proposal 11, including remote access UTD 158. Any researchers here to give an overview?
Yeah, this is Greg Phelan at Kennesaw State University. So with this project, we're interested in the large question of how did these outside forces change resource availability to schools and districts? And then ultimately, how are these changes in resources ultimately going to affect student outcomes? So in the proposal, we lay out two examples of the types of outside forces we're looking at. And one of them would be in the federal community eligibility provision, which provided resources for free lunch and breakfast at schools across the country. The other would be from a different angle, looking at some local oil value prices and seeing how does that change the resources of, in this case, you'd think of maybe like faculty and staff at the school, where they could end up seeing more lucrative opportunities outside of the education system. How's those, and in that shifting of staff, do we see any ultimate changes in outcomes of students long-term?
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I move to approve.
This is Adam. I'll
Sorry,
second.
Didn't mean to get in front of you.
No, it's all good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, proposal 12, including remote access, UH 036. Any researchers here to give overview?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Milena. I'm here on behalf of the project. I'm an associate professor of school psychology at the University of Houston. And our goal with this project is to really understand the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the area of writing. So we know pretty consistently students underperform in this area prior to the pandemic. But sort of the million-dollar question is what really the impacts were as a function of the pandemic. And so we hope to better understand this by answering three main questions. The first one is to replicate one of the few studies that's already out there looking at the impact of the pandemic on writing by looking at two different cohorts of students performing pre and then some performing post-pandemic. So fourth graders, for example, in 2019, and then fourth graders in 2021, and their performance on the STAR writing test. Similarly for seventh grade. We know there's some limitations with that approach, so we'd also like to look at it by examining cohorts. One cohort performing in fourth and seventh grade on the writing STAR before the pandemic, and then another cohort performing in 2018 and then in 2021 on the fourth and seventh grade writing tests. So whose performance would be then impacted potentially by the pandemic. And we're particularly interested in both the student and school level, so some more ecological factors that might have impacted changes in performance. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? All right, do I have a motion to approve proposal 12, remote access?
This is Adam. I'll motion to approve.
I'll second Celeste.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, proposal 13, including remote access UH 037. Any researcher here to give an overview?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Diego Briones. Thank you all for your time. So just a quick overview. So this proposal is for research of the long-term impacts of bilingual education programs in Texas for both English learner and non-English learner students. To highlight just a few reasons why I think this research is important to Texas education. One is just the pure fact that a large proportion of Texas students are English learners and thus represent an economically significant group for Texas school districts. Second, while there is a small set of causal literature evaluating short-run impacts of English learner programs, and I intend to extend this work with some methodological and data improvements, we still know very little about the long-term effects of these programs on, for example, college-going rates and employment outcomes. So getting a sense of sort of the true costs and benefits of these and evaluating long-term impacts is a key goal of this research work. And then the last piece that I just want to highlight here is sort of as the provision of these EL programs come with important school resource implications, both in the form of categorical aid and school input selection, understanding the underlying mechanisms driving the observed results, in my opinion, is critical for crafting effective policy, especially in light of the recent passing of Texas Senate Bill 560 back in June. So, and thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Do I have a motion to approve Proposal 13 with remote access?
Sure, this is Adam. I'll motion to approve.
This is Rodney Andrews. I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Proposal 14, including remote access, UH 038. Anyone here to give an overview?
Hello, I'm Rabia Tali
Hi.
from Rice University. So overview of the research. For this study, I want to evaluate the effect of the community eligibility provision program on students' academic and behavioral outcomes. Community eligibility provision, CEP, is a policy implemented as an alternative to the federally administered school meal programs. It allows schools and school districts to provide free meals to all students if 40% or more of them are identified as categorically eligible for free meals. And the program aims to reduce childhood food insecurity and increase food nutritional quality. In the case of program adoption, the percentage of students that is reimbursed at the free rate is equal to the percentage of categorically eligible students multiplied by 1.6. So using ERC data, I plan to evaluate the impact of CEP program on student outcomes, such as school attendance, suspension rates, college readiness, high school graduation, and admission to higher education programs. As a methodology, I will use difference in strategy. Specifically, I will compare the change in the outcomes of students from the CEP participating schools before and after the program implementation to the change in the outcomes of the students from CEP eligible but later participating schools. So I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? A minor technical question, and I don't have the remote access form in front of me, so one of the other board members, please help me. I have a note here that there might be a discrepancy between the number of years requested in the proposal and the remote access form, 3 versus 2 years.
If that's the case, Melissa, that would be, let me reconcile that because that would be my fault on the remote access. Whatever's in the proposal is the accurate number.
Perfect, thank you. All right, I have a motion to approve.
I motion to approve proposal 14. This is Celeste.
This is Adam. I'll second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Motion passes. All right, proposal 15 with remote access, UH 039. Anyone here to give an overview?
Hi, everyone. This is Tony. I'm here to discuss our proposal. A quick overview of the proposal. I'm with the University of Houston ERC. A quick overview of our proposal is just to examine all of the different impacts that the different admissions policies changes during COVID had, both at the student level and at the institutional level. So we're interested to understand which students changed attendance or enrollment, application, and attendance patterns, and then how the composition of students attending each type of university changed as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? I did have one question. I saw it was mentioned that models will be done separately for community college and university, but I did want to note, I mentioned this before, that the OOB that's being requested is, again, only there for applicants to four-year institutions. So if one of the outcomes is application, that one can only be used for university students.
Yeah, I apologize if I didn't articulate that clearly in the model, but we'd be focusing on enrollment there for community colleges.
Perfect. Yeah, this was more just make sure it's clear. The other notes I have is, will 2024 data be available by the end date of the study? We know this. And it could be that we just apply for an extension if needed, but note there. All right. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve proposal 15. This is Celeste.
Second.
This is Kathy. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you all
very much. All right, we're on to item 6. Consideration and possible action to approve requests for remote access to data, and both of these are commissioner-directed projects from the coordinating board. The first one is Remote 1, UTA 2103 TGCB. I believe a researcher might have joined us to give a brief overview.
Yeah, hi.
I'm happy to. Hi, John.
Hi, this is John Diamond. I'm joined by my colleague, Rebecca O'Donoghue today, and we're both here on behalf of MDRC, a nonprofit social policy research organization. And this proposal, we're proposing in partnership with the coordinating board, an evaluation of the Texas Transfer Grant Program, which is a grant program intended to incentivize vertical transfer, that is transfer from 2-year institutions to 4-year institutions within Texas. The program is targeted to low-income and high academically achieving students specifically. It's aligned with, I believe, one of the coordinating board's strategic priorities, which is around facilitating transfer. And the plan for the evaluation, we're planning a randomized controlled trial design. And we're planning to leverage, if approved, leverage ERC data to identify students who qualify as low income and high academically achieving and who may be at a point proximal to potentially transferring, combined with information contact information from FAFSA forms to connect with students who are randomly assigned to the program group. And then we will assess in the following year, next fall, students' enrollment in 4-year institutions, both for program and control groups, to see if the offer of a transfer grant of a flat scholarship amount to students in the program group helped convince some number of students to consider transferring, to apply for and transfer to a 4-year institution. Melissa or Becky, I don't know if either of you want to add anything to that.
I don't have anything to add, but Any questions or comments from the board? Right, then do I have a motion to approve remote access for this Commissioner Directed project?
This is Kathy. I move to approve remote access.
A second?
I'll second. This is Celeste. The one thing I think I noticed about both, so it's not just about this one, is I'm not sure there's any end date on these.
So this, oh, go ahead, Melissa.
Remote access form does have it, at least the one I'm looking at for this project. It's March 31st, 2023. But we can add it.
Okay, that's fine.
Presentation as well. Yeah, but an important point to keep in mind. There is an end date, yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so that was my second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes. Thank you, John, for being here.
Thank you.
All right, remote 2, UTA Commissioner Directive 2104 TGCB. Do we have a researcher? Matt, are you on? Give an overview. If not, I will. So this is essentially moving the access given to OnCourse that used to be housed at UT was in statute. It no longer is, and now OnCourse is at the Higher Ed Coordinating Board. However, OnCourse is still partnering with researchers at UT to perform the evaluations that are laid out in statute. So this is asking for remote access for this Commissioner Directive to do evaluation work on career and college advising within the OnCourse program. Are there any questions about this? Do I have a motion to approve?
This is Kathy. I'll move to approve.
A second?
Rodney, I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, next to final besides adjournment, agenda item is discussion of board operating procedures. So this is not meant to, there's no vote, there's nothing binding happening today. The goal of this is there's been a few things that have come up over the past year or so, even in this meeting. There have been a few examples of things that possibly we could shore up within our ERC policies. So today I wanted to get an idea from the board members of which items we could work on to either have our general counsel help draft up something that we could eventually react to and vote on, or possibly create some work groups to develop policies for things. So I put a few possible topics here just based on conversations with some of you that I've had in the past and my own observations. So this is meant to be an open conversation of what you all think is worthwhile in what we should focus on moving forward to make things more clear and help move things along, especially with, considering that remote access has been added. So I think several of you have seen increases in the requests for proposals. So we might need to think through how we can help that. So I'll just go over some of the things that have come up in some of my conversations here, and you all feel free to add or comment on this. The first thing to think about is possible possibly changing meeting cadence or length of meetings. I've heard this specifically because there are more proposals coming up because of remote access. So the thought is either waiting for quarterly meetings where there's a limit of 15, which also is a kind of a policy that we could discuss if we want to extend that. We could either allow for more proposals, or we could suggest more off-time meetings. Say we're required to do quarterly, but we can do more if the board thinks that that is worthwhile. Any thoughts on that? Is this something that you all think would be worthwhile to consider? If so, one option over the other sound better? Is this even an issue? I mean, maybe this is not an issue that we need more space to.
Well, I had more of how this process works. I know you all have to submit the agenda to, I guess, the Texas Register or something.
Correct.
So is there a time limit on, would we have time to add another meeting or not?
Yes, there's time. We submit the agenda, I think, within 10 days of a meeting. So yes, we are able to.
Okay, that's good, because I think in the past they'd said 35 or 45 days or something that it had to be out there. Okay.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, is the board considered a governmental body or not? I know it was put in some bill a while ago.
I will write that question down to ask our general counsel.
I just wondered if that made a difference on like the length of time for an agenda or something. And is that why we're having some changes, speaking of that, on how these meetings have to be presented?
So changes lately that have been happening are more about just following existing Open Meetings Acts. So we're following to the letter more of what's in Open Meeting Act.
Melissa,
and what is required for virtual meetings is separate too. So we're following those rules, which are a little different than we've done before. Sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
No, you're good. To Celeste's wonderings, it seems to me, I think what I heard you ask us is, are these two topics worth exploring? And I think Celeste's questions amplify my perspective that yes, I think these are worth exploring. I don't think you're asking us to reach a conclusion today, but these both seem like worthwhile spaces to understand in potentially different ways.
And I don't know the specific answer about governmental bodies and how that fits into what's required, but I have asked our general counsel about what options are available, and both of these are available to us. So we could either continue to have quarterly meetings and make them longer so we could fit more proposals, or we could add to the cadence. So both of these are options. I mean, one thing to note about having more rather than longer is it's less time for researchers to wait. But I don't know if you all think that's something worth considering, or.
Well, I know we're not going to reach a decision, but I do think having more meetings might be easier than lengthening them. Just my opinion on that.
Unless there are snacks.
Yes. And
so that's what this is for. I would like to hear your opinion on it.
Right. And that the less time, like even the one that we didn't approve, I would like to see it I guess looked at, reviewed again at sooner rather than the next quarterly meeting. Those type of things.
Great. The other thing that has come up in discussions is the possibility of some sort of bulk approval. And so let's talk about whether you think this is worthwhile. Most of the time, this would fall to likely data extensions and new data requests. However, I think we would, of course, need the option to be able to discuss something. So we could possibly think about doing something like a consent agenda where if any board member has something to ask or discuss about a given extension, say that could be pulled off of the consent calendar and then the rest could be approved altogether. Is this something that would be worth writing up a draft policy around, or do you like having them all?
Maybe around proposals that are, less than 5 years, or extension requests, right? Where you haven't gone out to 5 years, then maybe a special consideration, right? So to address some of the issues that we encountered in today's meeting.
Yeah, so some sort of policy that, these could all go on consent calendar, but if there's a special request, they would not be on it. I'm happy to ask our general counsel to draft something about that.
And this is just a throw-out item that I'm not totally dedicated to, but that, we at UT tend to have a lot of student proposals. And I sometimes, because they don't pay fees or many, they tend to fall to the bottom of the list sometimes. And I don't know if this would be a part of a bulk approval or not for some student ones, not, and I'm not saying they take less time per se, but it's a thought just because we end up having a fair amount of all 5 of ours can be as students or something, and we tend to have to put them off.
The other thing that has come up is the possibility of working on maybe more centralized procedures or documentation for certain things. I think one example that came up could be like extension forms. If there's something like being clear about start-stop dates, that sort of information. I think I talked to Linda about this earlier, or Linda Hargrove, and I can't remember, but I think there was a suggested template for a lot of these, but if we think there are enough questions that there are things we should add and everyone could fill out for either data requests, extension requests, even the remote access, if there's anything that board members often are finding they wish they knew, we could shore up our template to make sure that all the information is included in what we are requesting. I don't know if there are certain forms that anyone thinks that we could possibly have a work group or something to revise or add some more detail to things that are being requested, or remove things if they're never really that helpful to know.
I mean, that sounds reasonable to me.
Agreed.
Okay. What are some forms that might be the most useful to think about, like the extension? I'm thinking the extension requests. Any other forms?
Well, the data amendment and extension request. Yeah, and the remote, I guess. I mean, I don't have any comments on that, but some people might.
External data.
Supplemental data.
For supplemental data.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Good point. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to bring up that I can talk to our general counsel? We can get some things drafted. I just wanted to give you all the opportunity to.
Well, one more just adding to that supplemental, we actually just recently created a form because there has been so many discussions with TEA and coordinating board both of having to, I guess, explain to researchers the idea that they can't look at the identified data at the same time they're using the ERC data. And so we're just having a clarification form that people sign saying that they understand that and why that's, out there. So that's another possibility of a form or something that we could look at. And then that going back to, I guess really it's the first one here. We ended up, UT had 15 proposals for today's meeting. And we could only submit 6. Thank you to Kathy. We got one more in there. And I'm just, again, this is, I'm assuming given that remote access, people like that idea, and we're having more people from other universities outside of Texas hearing about the data. So I'm assuming this problem will continue and possibly get worse. I don't know, but I guess in hindsight, I should have thought of this earlier, that this might actually, happen, that more people are going to be interested. So that was this part of this first one on whether we really need to even have more meetings in, say, a meeting in January or February.
That's a good thought. Yeah, we could just add one more and kind of adjust the schedule to 5 instead of 4. All right, I really appreciate.
And one more thing, sorry.
Sure.
I don't want to extend this,
please.
but Adam had all those questions today, and I didn't know if we were supposed to address those or not. I know he's not on them.
My thought was, so Adam had questions about extensions and some of the things that we just mentioned about, was something a lapse or was it a resurrection? I think are those were his terms. And then being clear about how COVID, which includes like a blanket plus some leeway for each ERC, which I think are fair questions, which we could address by centralizing a form, or ensuring that these things are very clear.
Yeah, in agreement with that, Melissa. To a comment Rodney made earlier, I think that with the extension and data additions, I mean, those could have cells that much more explicitly articulate pieces of information that would, if not end resurrections, at least help clarify what context is at play. Because I mean, the COVID extensions explicitly are likely coming to those will end eventually.
We can only hope.
Okay, fair. That's fair.
Knock on wood, yes. Yes, but I think this is worth talking about because that's exactly it. I think, as Rodney mentioned, this context is key to understanding this. And so if there was a way to clearly state the full context of it. I'm thinking because I don't know, trying to follow Open Meetings Act. I think I will likely, seeing as we have a few things to discuss, possibly revising some forms, and we have another We had one proposal where we'll need to look at it again. We will reach out to board members to set up possibly a meeting before the regularly scheduled quarterly one. And of course, you know, it'll be done well in time to be able to post everything publicly about what we're doing. So unless anyone else has any comments, I think we can move to the last agenda item, and that's to adjourn.
Sorry, Melissa.
Sorry,
I know we all want to go, but
Okay,
I like the idea of, and maybe this is something for discussion in the little group, maybe documenting some of those successor data files from, especially I'm thinking of for TEA, where the files have changed names, and so that researchers don't have to amend their request, or we don't have to do it in the meeting. Either it's just understood. If you request this data file for these years, it also includes these data files, something like that.
Yeah, and that recently, as I said, the class roster one is the one that's come up, because, you know, do I give it to people who were doing that student teacher link or not, you know, because it's not named in their proposal.
Maybe having like a common understanding, or maybe we could develop something that's just agreed upon. But maybe we could look at that.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, definitely worth.
That concludes my comments. So.
That sort of concordance would be useful, I think, for, you know, other data elements as well, where, you know, your report S, report 2, where these sort of things, you know, start to change. So I agree.
Great. I appreciate y'all's input, and be in touch about further discussions on this. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn. This is Celeste.
A second.
I'll second.
You can stick around, y'all. I mean,
too late. I seconded.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. So we're adjourned. Thank you all so much for your time and your expertise.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.